The metallic fingers were the first thing she felt, cold and precise, wrapping around her shoulder from behind, pulling her bodily away from the door she'd been bracing shut with every kilogram she had. "Move," Ezra said. "They're right outside," Rhea whispered. Rain hammered the corrugated roof of the Delta shipping facility in overlapping waves, loud enough to mask voices, loud enough to mask fear. "I know." His prosthetic hand released her shoulder, and then his real one, his left, the one that could still feel temperature and pressure, and the trembling of her, curved around her hip with a certainty that emptied her lungs. "I still have one hand, Rhea." His voice was low, mouth close to her ear. "Or did you think that changes what I'm capable of?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. 6 weeks earlier, she had walked into Blackwell Holdings on Burrard Street with shaking knees and a manila envelope full of her brother's bank records, convinced she was about to be shown the door by a receptionist. She had not expected to end up in the office. Rhea Connolly was 26 years old and finishing the second year of her nursing degree at UBC. She worked weekend shifts at an urgent care clinic in Kitsilano, drove a 2016 Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror, and made excellent lemon squares for the nursing department's bake sales. She was, by every reasonable metric, not the sort of person who ended up in a penthouse boardroom on the 38th floor of a tower overlooking Burrard Inlet, sitting across a glass-topped desk from a man like Ezra Blackwell. And yet, her brother Gus had borrowed money from the wrong people. That was the kindest way to frame it. Gus, who was 4 years older and 12 years less cautious, had taken out a substantial private loan to fund a Vancouver real estate venture that collapsed spectacularly 6 months later. The loan had come through a firm called Meridian Capital, which had a sleek website and a King Street address, and was, it turned out, a wholly owned subsidiary of Blackwell Holdings, which was itself a privately held empire that operated in the grey space between legitimate security consulting and things that did not get written down. When Gus stopped being able to make payments, Meridian had begun sending men to his apartment. Then Gus had disappeared entirely. Rhea had spent 2 weeks calling hospitals and filing police reports that went nowhere before a mutual contact of Gus's told her, in a voice barely above a terrified murmur, that Gus was alive and being held in what the contact called protective custody until the debt was resolved. So she had gathered Gus's bank records, taken the SkyTrain downtown, and walked into Blackwell Holdings with the specific brand of calm that nursing school teaches you. The kind that lives just over the top of panic, that keeps your hands steady while everything underneath them shakes. She had not been shown the door. She had been shown to the 38th floor. Ezra Blackwell was standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows when she was brought in, his back to her, looking out over the inlet, and for a moment she registered only the silhouette. Broad through the shoulders, tall, wearing a charcoal suit with the jacket off and his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. Then he turned and she saw his right arm. The prosthetic started just below the elbow, high function, matte black, with articulated fingers that moved with quiet mechanical precision. He didn't conceal it or draw attention to it. He simply turned and looked at her, with a pair of dark brown eyes so utterly devoid of alarm at her presence that she understood immediately. He had known she was coming, long before she'd stepped off the elevator. "Mrs. Connolly," he said, not a question. "Mr. Blackwell." She placed the envelope on his desk. "I want to talk about my brother." He glanced at the envelope without touching it. He already knew what was inside. "Sit down." She sat. He did not. He moved to the edge of his desk and stood there, considering her the way a person considers a lock they haven't yet decided whether to open. "Your brother owes Meridian $183,000, he said. "Interest has been accumulating for 4 months. I know what he owes. Do you know what you can offer?" She had prepared for this. She had rehearsed it on the SkyTrain with her eyes fixed on the window and the city streaking past outside. "I'm a second-year nursing student. I specialize in wound care and post-surgical management." She paused carefully. "I heard that you have a medical situation your usual staff has been mishandling." Something shifted in Ezra's expression. Not much, a millimeter of stillness. "The amputation site," she said. "Recurrent infections. The dressings aren't being changed correctly, and whoever's been prescribing the topical treatments is using the wrong antibiotic class for the specific bacterial profile. It will get significantly worse if it isn't corrected." He studied her for a long moment. The mechanical fingers of his right hand flexed almost imperceptibly. 8 weeks, he said at last. "You live in the house, you manage the wound care, you speak to no one about anything you see or hear. At the end of 8 weeks, the debt is cleared and your brother goes home." She looked at him across the desk. "And if I refuse?" "Then this conversation ends and you leave the same way you came in." He said it without threat, which was somehow worse. "But Gus doesn't." She said yes. The Blackwell estate sat at the top of a forested road in West Vancouver, set back from the cliff edge with a view of the inlet that at any other point in her life Rhea would have found breathtaking. The house itself was modernist and severe, concrete and glass and reclaimed timber, the kind of architecture that expressed wealth through what it withheld rather than what it displayed. She was given a room on the second floor with her own bathroom, and a standing order that she was not to leave the property without a member of Ezra's security team. She was not a prisoner, she told herself. The distinction was fine enough to cut yourself on, but it existed. The first week she barely saw him outside of medical appointments. She changed the dressing on the amputation site every morning, assessed the infection, adjusted the treatment protocol, and noted the progress in a logbook she kept locked in her room. The tissue was responding, the redness retreating. She had been right about the antibiotic class. He endured her work with rigid patience, which she recognized as a particular brand of pride. The kind that didn't allow the words "thank you" or "this hurts," but permitted a slight unclenching of the jaw when the pain subsided. By the second week, she had learned his rhythms. He was up before 6. He spent 90 minutes in the basement physiotherapy room, relearning the mechanics of tasks that had once been automatic, recalibrating grip strength, retraining reflex chains through the prosthetic's sensor interface. She caught glimpses through the open door when she came down early. Sweat-dark shirt, jaw set, running through repetitions with the same absolute refusals to quit that she imagined had made him formidable long before anyone thought to test it. She did not offer help. She understood intuitively that this was not something he wanted watched, and that her not watching was a form of respect he would never acknowledge but registered completely. Gregor Thane was the one who first made her understand how precarious Ezra's position truly was. Thane was Ezra's second-in-command, his COO in the formal language of Blackwell Holdings, and something less cleanly titled in the operations that didn't appear in any filing. He was compact and expensive-looking, with the smooth confidence of a man who had spent years calculating the precise moment when confidence becomes leverage. He visited the estate often, and every time he came, Rhea noticed the way his eyes moved to Ezra's prosthetic with a fraction of a second's pause he'd clearly trained himself to conceal and hadn't quite managed. She was in the hallway outside the study when she heard Thane push for the first time. There was a competitor, a private intelligence firm called Shaw Meridian, run by a man named Harland Shaw, that had been aggressively courting Blackwell Holdings' largest clients. Thane wanted to respond with direct visible force, a show, something that signaled the organization wasn't passive. Ezra said no. "Shaw is trying to provoke a reaction. If we move overtly, we validate his narrative that we're weakened and acting from panic. We cut his operational pipeline where he can't see it, block his contracts at the procurement level, choke his data sourcing." Thane set his portfolio case down on the desk. His voice was carefully modulated, but Rhea could hear the edge beneath it. "Ezra, the teams need to see something. They see you running everything from a boardroom. They see the arm, and they start asking questions about field capacity." He said it with the thin veneer of concern. "Let me go visible. You authorize it, I execute. Nobody questions where the decision came from. There was a silence that stretched for several seconds. "Do you think I need 2 hands to take you apart, Gregor?" Ezra said. He said it the way he said most things, quietly, without volume, which was somehow the most frightening way to say it. Thane's polished composure flickered. "I'm just raising what I'm hearing from." "I heard you. Get out." After Thane left, Rhea stepped into the study. She'd been in the hallway long enough that pretending otherwise would have been insulting to both of them. A stack of documents had slid from the corner of the desk. She wasn't sure how. The tension in the room might simply have dislodged them by pressure alone. She crouched and gathered them without a word. "Leave them," Ezra said. She kept gathering. "I have them." "I said leave them." He crossed from the window to her in what felt like no time, and his left hand wrapped around her wrist, pulling her upright. His grip was like the closing of something irrevocable. He held her at eye level and looked at her with an intensity that stripped the room of all its ambient noise. "I am not something that needs to be tidied up," he said. His voice was very low. "I know that," she said. She did not look away. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Then he released her wrist and turned to the window. "There's a fundraising auction at the gallery on Saturday," he said, as though the last 30 seconds had happened to someone else. "You'll come. Dress appropriately." She left the room. Her pulse took another 10 minutes to settle. The Vancouver Art Gallery fundraiser was the city's most reliably attended charitable event. A masterwork of surface civility stretched over an ocean of professional rivalries and old money resentments. The kind of room where everyone had exquisite manners and absolutely no one trusted the person beside them. Rhea wore a navy dress she'd bought at a consignment shop in Kitsilano and altered herself the night before. Ezra fastened a sapphire pendant at her throat before they left, his left hand doing the clasp while the prosthetic rested at his side, and she stood very still and breathed slowly and tried to categorize the warmth of his fingers against her collarbone as entirely clinical. The room looked at him. She noticed it immediately. The way attention gathered around Ezra when he moved through a space, and the particular quality of that attention, partly gravitational, partly something more calculating. Harland Shaw found them within the first 20 minutes. Shaw was silver-haired and broad and had the genial aggression of a man who'd made a career of appearing approachable. He pressed Ezra's left hand warmly in both of his own and smiled with his whole face. "Ezra, looking well. It's good to see you out." A pause, precisely timed. "We were all a little worried after everything. Remarkable the way you've adapted." His gaze dropped, for the briefest appropriate fraction of a second, to the prosthetic. Ezra said nothing. His expression was pleasant and gave away nothing at all. "And you've brought a companion." Shaw's attention slid to Rhea with the particular variety of condescension that men like him reserved for women they'd already dismissed. "Lovely. It must be a comfort, having someone to help manage the day-to-day." He meant to wound. He landed it neatly and with total deniability. Rhea set her champagne flute down on the tray of a passing server. "Mr. Shaw," she said. She kept her voice pleasant. She'd learned it from Ezra, actually, the trick of sounding mild while delivering something lethal. "I've been following the Meridian contract reports with some interest. Your Q2 client retention figures, the ones that were supposed to be confidential, but apparently aren't, suggest you're down 4 major accounts in the past 6 months. Defense procurement, primarily." She tilted her head. "I imagine the pressure to land visible wins must feel rather urgent right now. That would explain the visits." Shaw's smile thinned to a line. "I hope the evening's productive for you," she said. He turned and found a reason to be somewhere else. There was a beat of silence. Then Ezra, who had been watching her with an expression she couldn't quite catalogue, said quietly, "Where did you get those numbers?" "You leave your briefings on the kitchen counter." Something moved through his face. Not quite amusement. Something more complicated and less comfortable. Before he could speak, every light in the gallery went out. The darkness lasted half a second before the screaming started. Automatic fire from somewhere outside the main hall sent the crowd into immediate panicked collapse. Rhea grabbed Ezra's arm, his left arm, instinctively, as bodies surged around them. His hand closed over hers, anchoring her. "Stay low, move with me." They went left while the crowd went right. Through a service door Rhea hadn't noticed in the wall behind the champagne table, and then into a tight corridor behind the gallery's exhibition rooms. She could hear boots on the marble somewhere behind them, voices in low and coordinated bursts. Ezra pulled them into a small storage room off the corridor, archival by the smell of it, boxes of catalogues and framing material stacked in the dark. He pulled the door shut and engaged the mechanical lock with practiced efficiency. The room was very small. Her back was against a shelf. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him. She couldn't see clearly, and her hands moved before she could stop them, across his chest, his ribs, down his left arm to verify he was intact. "You need to tell me if you've been hit," she said, and hated that her voice shook. "The prosthetic side, you can't always feel." "Rhea, if a fragment catches the stump, you might not register it immediately, and the tissue trauma could." "Rhea." His left hand found the back of her neck, warm and certain, and she stopped talking. He didn't grip hard. He didn't need to. The contact alone regrounded her. Footsteps in the corridor, slowing near the door. "I still have one hand," he said. His voice was barely above a breath. "Or did you think that changes what I'm capable of?" She looked at him in the dark. Her pulse was a steady roar in her ears. "No," she whispered. "I didn't think that." His thumb moved against the base of her neck, a small contained thing. Then there were two shadows under the door, and the handle moved, and Ezra's left arm swept her aside in the same motion that brought his hand up, and the shots were so precise that she barely registered them as two separate sounds before it was over. He reloaded with the quiet efficiency of someone for whom the action had stopped requiring conscious thought. "Come on," he said. "We go now." She came. They did not go back to West Vancouver. The cars took them to a secondary operations center near the port of Vancouver, a concrete facility indistinguishable from the industrial warehousing around it, except for the density of people moving through it and the quality of the communications equipment inside. Rhea did not go to the designated rest area. She pulled a chair to the edge of Ezra's workspace and stayed. She watched him dismantle Gregor Thane's network from a standing position, moving between screens and secure lines, and the quiet faces of people who listened to him with the particular focus of the deeply loyal. He worked for 40 hours nearly straight, and she brought him coffee and made sure he ate, and the operators in the room, people who had clearly never looked at her before, began to do so the way they looked at someone who belonged there. A field operator was brought in on the second night, injured, from Thane's circle. He told them Thane was holding at a shipping facility in Delta. 40 armed people, fortified position. He said it like he expected it to stop something. Ezra was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at his operations director, a steady-eyed woman named Kara, who Rhea had learned to consider extremely capable in a very short time. "Have the embedded team confirm positions. We move at 3. "You're not going yourself," Rhea said. She was on her feet before she'd decided to stand. "That facility, 40 people, and you don't know which of them have genuinely switched and which are going to fire on anything that moves. You go in there and you're a target in a room full of confusion." Ezra looked at her. "Let Kara run it," she said. "You run it from here, where you can actually see everything." "Gregor needs to see me," he said. Not argued. Stated. "This is a question of who holds this organization. That question has to be answered by the person asking it." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about arguing further and understood, with a clarity that surprised her, that it wouldn't change anything. Not because he was arrogant, but because he was right. She had seen enough in the last 6 weeks to understand the difference. "Then come back," she said. Something moved through his expression, quick and not quite named. He crossed to her and took her face in his left hand. He looked at her for a moment with those dark eyes she had spent 6 weeks trying to read and only partially managed. He kissed her. It was brief and certain, and tasted of black coffee and something more complicated than she had words for yet. When he stepped back, she was holding the front of his jacket with both hands and had no memory of having reached for him. He left. The Delta facility smelled of salt and diesel and the particular cold of a BC coastal night. Shipping containers rose in dark columns around the central warehouse, and inside, Gregor Thane paced the length of his position with a precision that was beginning to look like anxiety. He had 40 people. He had anticipated Ezra would send a force. He had arranged a crossfire. What rolled back the loading bay door was a single figure. Ezra walked in out of the rain, tactical gear fitted close, his prosthetic visible in the harsh halogen wash of the warehouse lights. He walked to the center of the space and stopped. He did not look at the catwalks where Thane's people were positioned. He looked at Gregor. "You gave Shaw the security layout for the gallery," he said. Thane's chest rose. He was already holding his weapon, which said something about how frightened he actually was. "You've been running this organization on fumes and reputation for 14 months, he said. His voice was loud. He was performing for the room, not conversing. The clients see it. The teams see it. You've been sitting in that house letting a nursing student change your bandages and pretending that constitutes leadership." He raised the gun. "It's over, Ezra. I'll make it fast." Ezra did not move. His expression was exactly what it had been in the boardroom, in the gallery, in every room where someone had looked at the prosthetic and drawn a conclusion they thought was final. "You spent 14 months watching my right arm," he said. "You forgot to watch everyone else." Thane fired. The gun made no sound except a dead click. Gregor stared at it. He cycled the action and fired again. Another click. He turned to the catwalks. "Shoot him, someone!" Nobody moved. The 40 people on the catwalks and behind the containers stood with weapons lowered. From the shadows near the rear exit, Kara and the embedded team stepped into the light. Ezra reached into his jacket with his left hand. He drew his weapon with the ease of 18 months of left-handed retraining, every session in the basement range accounting for precisely this moment. "I still have one hand, Gregor," he said, quiet, almost gentle. "Did you really think that changed what I was capable of?" He fired once. Gregor Thane went down. "Secure the facility," Ezra said, and walked back out into the rain. The armored car pulled up to the port operations center just after 4 in the morning. Rhea was standing just inside the steel door when it opened. She hadn't rehearsed anything. She'd spent the last 2 hours sitting on a packing crate with a cup of tea gone cold, and she had made no plans at all, because making plans had felt presumptuous in a way she couldn't quite explain. When she saw him come through the door, steady, unhurried, rain-dark at the shoulders, she crossed the distance without thinking. She put her arms around him. She pressed her face against his chest and felt his heartbeat, steady, measured, slightly elevated, beneath her hands. His left arm came around her immediately, solid and certain, pulling her in. "It's done," he said. "I know," she exhaled. "I've been listening to Kara's comms for the last 40 minutes. She felt something move through his chest. Not quite a laugh, something quieter. She pulled back to look at him. There was a graze along his jaw, shallow, probably fragment debris, and she was going to address it properly in about 3 minutes. Right now she was looking at his face. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. She had the sense it was not something he asked people often, possibly ever. She considered it honestly. She thought about the 2 men in the storage room and the way he had shot them with no apparent expenditure of emotion. She thought about 40 people standing down because he had spent months building something that had nothing to do with fear. She thought about the way his thumb had moved against the back of her neck in the dark of that corridor. "I should be," she said. "I'm aware of that. But I'm not." She reached up and touched the graze at his jaw, careful and clinical. Sit down. I need to look at this. He sat. He let her look. In the grey wash of early morning light, with the port of Vancouver going about its vast and indifferent business outside, and the remaining operators moving quietly at the far end of the room, he sat still beneath her hands and, for the first time in 6 weeks, let himself be tended to without the rigid performance of not needing it. She pressed clean gauze to the greys and held it. Gus goes home tomorrow, he said. Yes. And the 8 weeks are nearly up, she said. She did not move the gauze. She did not step back. He looked at her. The mechanical fingers of his right hand rested on the arm of the chair. His left hand came up and closed over her wrist, not pulling, not holding her in place, just resting there, warm and certain and present. Stay, he said. Rhea Connolly, who drove a Honda Civic with a cracked mirror and made lemon squares for department bake sales, and had walked into a 38th floor boardroom 6 weeks ago with shaking knees, looked at Ezra Blackwell in the 4 o'clock light of a concrete room beside the port of Vancouver. Outside, the rain had stopped. The water moved in the dark, quiet and indifferent the way it always did. The city held its breath. All right, she said. The iron hand of the West Coast had taken back what was his and kept what was new.